important. Second, it's being recorded now. Okay. We've got a really important piece to listen to now. I'm just going to make sure we're all on mute so everyone can hear. This final song of Hamilton is surprising in that Hamilton just died. How can Hamilton the musical not be over if Hamilton is now dead, right? He was shot in the duel, and Aaron Burr is the killer. And we heard from Aaron Burr last week. You know, I'm now the villain in your history, and just the remorse and the lessons that he learned along the way. But here we have one more song called "Who Lives, Who Dies, Who Tells Your Story," and it's a really interesting choice to make that Lin-Manuel Miranda made, to have the musical go one more piece where we hear all of the survivors of Hamilton's life tell the story of his life. And what we're really going to be looking at today is how we remember, how we pay tribute, how we remember stories or people as a nation and as individuals. Before I play that last song, I want to play the song that is echoed in this song. So the song opens with Washington, President Washington, who's already deceased in the musical. He starts by sort of putting this refrain out there: who lives, who dies, who tells your story. But it's a refrain that had popped up much earlier in the story in Act 1, where Hamilton's been begging and begging. It says Hamilton wants to fight, not write. He wants to command some troops. He wants to fight in battle, and Washington, his boss, keeps, you know, making him write and lead in other ways. And finally, he gives him a troop to command. So the song that Washington sings in that moment where he hands over the sword and he hands over a command to Alexander Hamilton, that song is called "History Has Its Eyes on You." But it is very much the feeling that comes back now in the last song, "Who Lives, Who Dies, Who Tells Your Story." So I'd like to play that for you. We're not going to listen to the whole song. "History Has Its Eyes on You." It's actually a rather short song anyway, but we're going to listen to about a minute of it, and you'll see then how Washington will be the voice that starts the last song in the same way. So this is "History Has Its Eyes on You." I sort of regretted that I never used this in our classes together. There could be so many biblical stories about finding a successor, right, from one leader to the next, that could fit in with this song. It just didn't happen. We're going to leave it for the podcast, but it's, to me, actually, this is one of my favorite songs in the musical. So just listen to the way that it's a moment of gravitas, and it's a moment of knowing that this is a historic moment that other people will talk about later. And of course, the later is going to be the end of the musical, when Hamilton is gone and people are telling his story. Here we go.
I lie awake, knowing history has its eyes on me. History has its eyes on me. Let me tell you what I wish I'd known when I was young and dreamed of glory. You have no control. Who lives, who dies, who tells your story? I know that we can win. I know that greatness lies in you. But remember, from here on in, history has its eyes on you.
ends with that dissonant chord. So I don't know if you noticed the way that they slowed the tempo during Who Lives, Who Dies, Who Tells Your Story. So the audience is meant to notice that and remember it, because now it will come back. So the song we're about to hear is everybody else telling about Hamilton's life now that he is gone. In the previous song, Hamilton said, "What is a legacy?" Right? A legacy is planting seeds in a garden you never get to see. So now we, the audience, get to see a little glimpse of that garden. And you'll hear first from his enemies or his rivals, right? You'll hear Jefferson and Madison, who really criticized Hamilton during his lifetime, now sort of giving tribute to his greatness. And then, of course, you hear Eliza, and Eliza carries the bulk of the song. Aaron Burr begins as the narrator of the song. He's been the narrator all along, but then we turn to Eliza. I can't get through this song. I mean, it is so emotionally loaded. Has anyone raised their hand if you've heard the song yet? Some of you have, many of you haven't. Okay. The word at the end, time. Right? She sings time. If I only had more time. You really do write like you're running out of time, because Hamilton didn't have enough time. And you'll hear Eliza saying that after Hamilton passed, she lives another 50 years. So she is the one who has the chance to tell his story. And the way that she enters into this song is by saying that she puts herself back in the narrative. When had she taken herself out? She had taken herself out of the narrative when Hamilton cheated on her, when she was so angry, and rightfully so. And now she realizes she has a place in the narrative. She has control over the narrative. So what we're going to do is, unfortunately, there's no video of the full song available publicly. So we're going to listen to the audio of the full song. And then there is a video of the last minute and 25 seconds. So after we hear the full song, I just want you to be able to see that last part, which is just so touching. And then after that, the text that we'll look at are some texts about memory, as I said, about remembering. How do we remember? How do we remember as a nation or as individuals? So here we go. I just have to get the right clip. One moment. Okay, so as I said, this is audio only, but I'm doing it with just the plain screen that they have on YouTube. And listen for the different ways that we remember.
Let me tell you what I wish I'd known when I was young and dreamed of glory. You have no control. Who lives, who dies, who tells your story?
President Jefferson. I'll give him this. His financial system is a work of genius. I couldn't undo it if I tried. And I tried.
Who lives, who dies, who tells your story?
President Madison.
He took our country from bankruptcy to prosperity. I hate to admit it, but he doesn't get enough credit for all the credit he gave us.
Who lives, who dies, who tells your story?
Every other founding father story gets told. Every other founding father gets to grow old.
And when you're gone, who remembers your name? Who keeps your flame? Who tells your story? Who tells your story? Who tells your story?
John C.
I'm so sorry. That's what YouTube does to you sometimes. They throw an ad in, and I tried to head that off before. I'm going to let this play, and then we'll get back to the song. Oh my goodness. You know what I'm going to do instead? I'm going to play the audio of it without this YouTube mess. I'm sorry about that. Just at the most beautiful moment. We're going to start again, my friends. We're going to start again. I have an audio only. Gosh. You know, sometimes YouTube puts the ads at the beginning. So I waited to make sure there were no ads at the beginning, but then once in a while they put an ad in the middle. Yeah, and then that happens. Okay, This is audio only. I promise this is not on YouTube. This is my Apple Music account. So we're going to go back to the beginning of Who Lives, Who Dies, Who Tells Your Story.
Let me tell you what I wish I'd known when I was young and dreamed of glory. You have no control. Who lives, who dies, who tells your story?
President Jefferson. I'll give him this. His financial system is a work of genius. I couldn't undo it if I tried. And I tried.
Who lives, who dies, who tells your story?
President Madison. He took our country from bankruptcy to prosperity. I hate to admit it, but he doesn't get enough credit for all the credit he gave us.
Who lives, who dies, who tells your story?
Every other founding father story gets told. Every other founding father gets to grow old.
And when you're gone, who remembers your name? Who keeps your flame? Who tells your story? Who tells your story? Who tells your story?
Eliza, I put myself back in the narrative. I stop wasting time on tears. I live another 50 years. It's not enough. I interview every soldier who fought by your side.
She tells our story.
I try to make sense of your thousands of pages of writings. You really do write, but you're running out of time. I rely on Angelica. While she's alive, we tell your story. She is buried in Trinity Church near you. When I needed her most, she was right on time. And I'm still not through. I ask myself, what would you do if you had more time? The Lord in his kindness, he gives me what you always wanted. He gives me more time. I raise funds in D.C. for the Washington Monument.
She tells my story.
I speak out against slavery. You could have done so much more if you only had time. And when my time is up, have I done enough? Will they tell your story? Oh, can I show you what I'm proudest of?
The orphanage.
I established the first private orphanage in New York City.
The orphanage.
I helped raise hundreds of children. I get to see them growing up. In their eyes I see you, Alexander. I see you every time. And when my time is up, have I done enough? Will they tell your story? Oh, I can't wait to see you again. It's only a matter of time. Will they tell your story? Who lives, who dies, who tells your story? Will they tell your story? Who lives, who dies, who tells your story?
Now, isn't that beautiful? We're going to watch now the final minute where you hear Eliza talking about the orphanage. By the way, Lin-Manuel Miranda wrote, if that wasn't actually the true story, that she created an orphanage in his memory, that would have sounded so trite, but this is what she did. I mean, in their eyes, I see you, Alexander. My goodness. Okay, we're going to try again, because even if YouTube does YouTube on us, it's worth it to see this last clip. There's one thing I'm going to say before we watch it. There's at the end, which you don't hear in the soundtrack, there's a gasp. So Eliza, standing, looking out at the audience, gives a gasp, and nobody has been willing to say why or what that gasp is meant to symbolize. It's up for interpretation. I'll tell you afterwards what some people theorize that the gasp is about, but you'll see that at the end. Okay, so here's the last minute of the song where she steps forward.
Can I show you what I'm proudest of? The orphanage. I established get to see them growing up. In their eyes I see you, Alexander. I see you every time. And when my time is up, have I done enough? Will they tell my story? Oh, I can't wait to see you again. It's only a matter of time. Will they tell your story? Who lives, who dies, who tells your story? Will they tell your story? Who lives, who dies, who tells your story?
I know, right? So some have I tried to read articles about what this gasp means, and Lin-Manuel Miranda won't say. I don't know if anyone has seen an actual answer, but some say that they want it to be Eliza actually seeing the audience at the end and realizing we've told his story, that all of these people are now hearing Hamilton's story through her. And in many ways, this is a realization of her life's mission to tell his story. Another interpretation I saw, I mean, it's as if I'm talking about a Torah text, right? One commentary, another interpretation, but this is art, right? There's interpretations. Another interpretation I saw was that it was meant to be then, you know, where she says, I can't wait to see you again. And she lived to 97, and she, you know, that somehow this is now her in the afterlife, seeing him again. Anyway, I don't want to spend too much time on Hamilton without going to the Torah. So I'm actually not going to look at the lyrics with us together right now, just to say that there are so many ways that she told these stories. She did mention, you know, keeping the flame alive. I mean, there are so many images that are used in this song. We're going to look at a few Torah texts that have to do with remembering or telling a story, and we'll see where it takes us. So here we go. I'm sharing now the source sheet in Sefaria. Okay. So the first one, perhaps the most obvious connection about telling our story, is a very explicit mention time and again with regards to the foundational story of our nation, the story of the Exodus from Egypt. Time and again, the Torah says, you know, someday in the future, your children will ask you about this. Why are you doing this Seder? Or why are you doing these rituals? Or what is this all about? Ki yish'alcha bincha machar, when your child, that's interesting, it says here children, but bincha is certainly a singular, child. When your child asks you machar, tomorrow, which means tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow in the future, and your child will ask, ma ha'edot v'hachukim v'hamishpatim, why? What is the meaning? What is the reason for all of these laws and decrees that God commanded us? Asher tziva Hashem Elokeinu etchem. God commanded you. Actually, these verses go right into the Haggadah. Etchem, why is he commanding you? So that, you know, the Haggadah then uses different verses to sort of symbolize the 4 sons or the 4 children. But what the child is responding to is seeing a memorial, seeing some concrete action of laws or behaviors, and it gives us the opportunity to tell the story. Ve'amarta levincha, you will tell your child the following. Avadim hayinu leparo b'Mitzrayim, we were slaves to Pharaoh in Egypt. God took us out of Egypt. I'm not going to read every word here, right? Verse 21, verse 22, and God did all of these signs and wonders for us and took us out. Verse 23, ve'otanu hotzi misham, took us out from there, lema'an havi otanu, in order to bring us, lated lanu, and to give us et haaretz asher nishba la'avotenu, the land that God promised to our forefathers. And all of these laws come with the package of this. It doesn't necessarily specifically refer to Passover, but that these commandments are part of our lasting mission. And God wanted to give us merit and gave us all of these commandments to observe. So what this is memory through narrative, through storytelling, but experiential storytelling. I'm going to dip this, vegetable into salt water so that the children will ask me and I get to tell them. And we perpetuate the storytelling from generation to generation. I'm going to show you one more place of many where the Torah mentions the storytelling of the Exodus from Egypt. And this is at the very end of Devarim. This is the next generation now being told that when you get into the land, Moses tells them at the end of his life, when you get into the land and you get to actually harvest the fruit of the land, this is what's called the bikurim, the first fruits. And the mikra bikurim, the text of the bikurim, the text of the first fruits that the farmer recites when bringing that offering, which would have started on Shavuot and then gone throughout the harvest season, whenever that new crop is ready. You bring that first pomegranate, the first olive, the first grapes to the temple in Jerusalem, and you recite a story. You recite your national story, not just your personal story of thank you for this harvest, but you come to the priest and the priest takes the basket of fruits, and then you recite verse 5, Ve'anita ve'amarta lifnei Hashem Elokecha, standing there in the sacred space before God in Jerusalem, Arami oved avi, this is the Haggadah, right? My father was an Aramean, Vayered Mitzrayim, went down to Egypt, Vayagar Sham bimtei me'at, sojourned there and became a great nation, Vayihi lagoy gadol atzum varav. This is the text of the Haggadah. And for anyone who's ever been in a Haggadah class with me over the years, I always talk about the appropriateness of this being the core text of the Haggadah. All of that introductory songs and telling gets us to the point where we actually tell the story on Passover night. And when we tell the story, which starts with the section of Tzei Ulemad, come and study, let's study the story, the text that we use is this text. It's the Deuteronomy text. It's not the Exodus text itself. It is the retelling of the Exodus a generation later. In the book of Devarim, Moses is speaking to people 40 years later who were not there, or if they were there, they were children. And now a generation later, 40 years later, they are given a model for how to tell the story. And they tell the story in the first person. I was, or we at least, right? We were slaves. The verse 6, right? The Egyptians dealt harshly with us and oppressed us, and we called out to God. We, who's we? Yes, it's we. This is how we tell the story. We tell the story as if it is our story, because everybody sees themselves as having some experience of the Exodus. And Moses is not only talking to this second generation, but telling them about the future. Here's how you will continue to tell this story. Every time you feel gratitude in the Holy Land, gratitude for your own harvest, you reach back into the history books and you tell the founding story. I mean, that's what Hamilton is, right? It's retelling the founding story of the nation and telling it through the lens of the 21st century, telling it, speaking about abolishing slavery and speaking about immigration and speaking about an old story in very new ways, like every Haggadah out there does. But that's essentially the model that's being presented here, a script for telling the story through the generations. And if you just skip ahead, verse 8 is where we get out of Egypt. And then verse 9, Vayivi'enu el hamakom hazeh, and God brought us to this place. It brings us right to today. This day where this farmer, Vayiten lanu et haaretz hazot, is saying God gave us this land, Eretz Zavat Chalav Udvash, the land flowing with milk and honey. And now, ve'ata, it brings us right to the present for this farmer. Hinei hevetzi et reshit pri ha'adama, I've brought my first fruits. And these first fruits that you gave me, God, I give thanks for them by putting them in the context of the story. So the remembrance through the storytelling is a very big piece of memory. And I want to switch gears in two ways. So I want to switch gears to the physical monuments. There were monuments that were mentioned, remembrances that were mentioned in the song, and also gears to the personal loss. So this is going to be Jacob. Jacob, who also loses his spouse at a young age, just like the Hamilton narrative. And the word that we're going to look at in this text is the word matzeva. The matzeva, or what we might say in Yiddish, the matzeva, is the monument, the stone that we put up to remember our loved ones with. So if you recall in the song, Eliza talks about raising funds in DC for the Washington Monument, and then Washington's voice pops in there and says, she tells my story. Also, when she talks about interviewing all the soldiers who fought by your side, the soldiers in the cast say, she tells our story. So that was a narrative piece, by the way. And she mentions Angelica, who's buried in Trinity Church near you. So the burial places, the monuments, the physical stones are very much part of memory. This is how we remember our loved ones. By the way, I did just a little research into the Trinity Church thing. Trinity Church is a small church in Lower Manhattan, where apparently Hamilton and his family were parishioners. And Alexander Hamilton has a big monument with his name on it there, which of course, after the musical came out, suddenly it was like a pilgrimage site. Before, no one paid any attention to Hamilton's grave. And then people were taking, selfies at Hamilton's grave suddenly at Trinity Church. Not so different from Lahavdil, I don't know, but in the years since Leonard Cohen passed away, suddenly the Shar Shemayim became a tourist destination in a new way. Anyway, and Angelica, it says in the song, Angelica is buried in Trinity Church near you, which is true. But Angelica is buried in like a family plot. So it doesn't say her name at all. And apparently it wasn't unusual to bury several family members in a single plot. And she's buried in a plot that is through her husband's family name. So it's like a relative through marriage named Livingston. Her husband's last name was Church, but she's in the Livingston family plot. So it's a little bit romanticized in the song. As if Angelica and Alexander Hamilton were, somehow united in death, even though they couldn't be together in life. Like, it didn't really look that way. In reality, you don't get to see a grave that says Angelica Schuyler. There is a grave that says Eliza Schuyler, or Eliza Schuyler Hamilton. I can't remember exactly what's on it. Anyway, so this is Jacob. And we're starting actually way before, or just before the death of Rachel, of Jacob's beloved wife. This is after he has left with his family, heading back to the land of Israel. Right now he has 4 wives and 11 children. And this is where he gets his new name, even though it was already hinted to before. But verse 11, God says, your name is Jacob, lo yikareh shimcha od Yaakov. Now, not Jacob, but Israel. Ki'im Yisrael yihiyeh shemecha. Although throughout the rest of the Torah narrative, he is still referred to sometimes as Jacob. It kind of goes back and forth. But this is where God calls him Vayikra et Shemo Yisrael, which is sort of his national name. And God gives him the promise of the covenant of Abraham. Vayomer lo Elokim ani kel Shaddai pirei urevei goy kahal goyim yihiyem mimeka. So I am the Lord, I'm your God. You shall be fruitful and multiply and become the father of nations. Melachim echelatzacha yetzeyu. You'll be the father of kings. And this land, right? A nation and a land. This is the Abrahamic covenant. This land, et haaretz asher natati la'Avraham u'leYitzchak, that I gave to Abraham and Isaac, your forefathers, now will be yours as well. Lecha etznena u'lezaracha acharecha, and to your offspring after you, etena ta'aretz, I will give this land. And God departs from him, and Jacob makes a matzeva, which happens again and again and again throughout the text. This isn't the one time. When there's a covenant, there's a matzeva. When there's a covenant between Yaakov and Lavan, his father-in-law, there's a matzeva, a monument, a remembrance. So God spoke to Jacob, and Jacob sets up a pillar. Vayatsev is the Hebrew verb of the word matzeva. So he monumented a monument. He set up a pillar. Matzeva b'makom asher diber ito matzevet aven. So he sets up a pillar in the spot that God spoke to him, because this was a monumental, no pun intended, moment for Jacob. And he puts, libations on it. This is sort of consecrating it or giving thanks to God, because he was just told, this is it. You're now one of the patriarchs. And God calls this place Beit El, the place where God spoke to him in that time. It wasn't the only time God spoke to him, I should just clarify, but it was an important time. And then they move on, and Rachel has difficulty in childbirth. And this is the tragic death of Rachel as she gives birth to her second son, which she waited and prayed for. Finally, she had Joseph, and now she's going to have Benjamin, but she's going to die while birthing Benjamin. So in the moment, verse 17, as the labor is at its most difficult, as if to try to comfort her, the midwife turns to her and says, don't worry, this also is a son to you. This is what she wanted. I don't know that I don't think this is a misogynist moment. I think this is just, she wanted a male offspring. She wanted a son. She even named Yosef li ben acher. May God give me another son. I want a son, second son. And so in the moment that she, in her last breath is dying, it's such a tragic, terrible scene. She names her son Ben Oni, son of my pain, of my anguish. And Aviv Karalo Binyamin, the father, Jacob, steps in. This is a whole other class. And calls him Binyamin. All of the children until now have been named for the rivalry, the baby wars between Rachel and Leah. I want another son. Thank you for giving me another son. Maybe my husband will love me now. And Binyamin Ben Oni, come on, this child is not going to be named about the death of his mother in childbirth. Binyamin, son of strength. It's like Jacob finally puts his foot down and gets to name his last child. And so then tragically, Rachel dies. Vatamat Rachel, vatikaver b'derech Efrata hi Beit Lechem. She is buried on the road to Efrat in Beit Lechem, and that, of course, is still where Kever Rachel is today, where we can visit, and the tradition is to pray at the grave of Rachel, and that's the matzeva. Vayatsev Yaakov, verse 20, matzeva al kivurata. Jacob sets up a pillar. Hi matzevet kivurat Rachel ad hayom. Until today, this is Kever Rachel. Rachel later becomes a symbol of motherly mercy. The prophet Jeremiah says Rachel is crying over her children as they leave to exile because she's on the road, right? So they pass her by, and she cries and cries for her children. So she's always a tragic figure. And again, the way that we remember her, and she sort of takes on this mother role in the nation, is very much tied up in this matzeva. So I guess in this way, burial matters, and a stone matters, and stone is what we erect for our loved ones when we no longer have them with us. And it's something that Eliza herself is wondering, I'm trying so hard to tell your story, and she sort of says, have I done enough? Have I been enough? I wish I had more time. I know from speaking with many families in times of loss, it also often feels like when you're trying to choose those words on the monument, it's never enough. Can you ever summarize a person's life by saying, beloved father, husband, or mother, wife, grandmother? You can't. It's never enough. But the stone, of course, symbolizes something that will be here when any of us are gone, of course. So there's a permanence to this kind of remembering. So we've had memory through narrative, memory through physical monument, which is very present also, as I said, in the song. And I'm going to mention two more. This brief excerpt here is the excerpt about remembering Amalek, remembering the offense of Amalek against us when we were at our weakest. This is just in the wake of the battle of Amalek, who attacked the Israelite nation just after leaving a slave nation, just leaving Egypt. And God and the people defeat Amalek, and then God says, "Ktov zot zikaron basefer," write this, record this, v'sim be'oznei Yehoshua, and tell Yehoshua, who is going to bring this nation into the land and has to continue this memory as well. I will blot out the memory of Amalek. And I didn't bring the other text, but later, of course, it becomes sort of a command. You shall always remember to blot out Amalek's name. And we think about that when we're shaking our groggers at Purim, right? We're trying to blot out the name of Haman, who came from Amalek. So, there's an important mention here of writing something down, of telling it to the leadership, and what we do with these verses, again, not this verse, but the later verses that refer to erasing Amalek, is that we read them every year to also remember that story. But finally, I wanted to get to another kind of memory, and this to me is very present in the final song. And this is the memory of action, of being driven to action in someone's or something's memory. This is the orphanage. Because you remember that you were slaves in Egypt, you have an obligation to show mercy and deference to the stranger. You were strangers in the land of Egypt. So this is sort of a mission-driven memory. The text that I brought for you here in Devarim is the text from the Ten Commandments. And most of us don't always pay attention to this because the Ten Commandments, of course, is written twice. They're written twice in the Torah. The text of the Ten Commandments comes first in the book of Shemot, in the book of the Exodus, when we're standing at Sinai. And there it says, Zachor et Yom HaShabbat, remember the Shabbat day. And it says, remember Shabbat because God rested on the seventh day. So this is how you remember that God created the world. But there are a couple of changes when the Ten Commandments are repeated, when Moses is restating them in the book of Devarim to the next generation, as I mentioned, right? This is 40 years later. Not only does it say Shamor instead of Zachor, and we say this in Lecha Dodi, Shamor v'Zachor b'dibur echad. God said both of those words, Shamor and Zachor, these two different ways of understanding Shabbat. But it also gives a very different message about why we keep Shabbat. It's the ethical, social message. We keep Shabbat not only because we recognize God as the creator of the world, but also we recognize that I as employer and you as employee, and I as the powerful and you as the powerless, are not what we're about, as human beings. So on the seventh day, I'll just pick it up with verse 14. Yom HaShvi'i Shabbat, the Shabbat to God, don't do any of this labor. You and anyone in your household and all of the animals and everyone who works for you, essentially, lema'an yanuach, so that may rest your avdecha va'amatcha kamocha, so that your male and female, it's slaves here. We could translate that today towards employees. I mean, slavery was a reality in biblical times. This is a way of having ethical slavery, that if I get a day off, my slaves get a day off. My employees get a day off. Why? This is how you remember, or this is the ethical imperative of your memory of your slavery in Egypt. V'zacharta ki eved hayita be'eretz Mitzrayim. Remember that you were slaves in the land of Egypt. Vayotzi acha Hashem Elokecha misham, and God took you out from there. This is all the good Passover stuff, with a strong hand, with an outstretched arm. Therefore, it's a very strong connection. Therefore, God commands you to keep Shabbat. We've had therefore twice here. Therefore is here, al kain, because God took you out of Egypt, therefore God commands you to always give your employees a rest. And previously also, lema'an, keep Shabbat so that your employees will rest. Shabbat is the great equalizer. Shabbat is the active remembering of the Exodus from Egypt. And this is one of many, many verses, the one here from Shemot. Don't wrong a stranger, don't oppress the stranger, because you were strangers in the land of Egypt. So you see what I mean by that's the orphanage, right? That's how Eliza says, I see you every time, right? In these children, I get to see them growing up. And she knows that Alexander Hamilton was an orphan and he was given a shot, or he didn't throw away his own shot, right? He made his way, but she wants to give that same chance to many other hundreds of children. And so she establishes the first private orphanage in New York City, and apparently ran it for 27 years or something. I mean, I don't imagine that she ran the day-to-day operations, but that she was very much active in the orphanage all along. Thank you, Carol, for that comment about the Trinity Church Choir. So I'm going to stop the screen share here. We've said a lot. We've said a lot all year. Does anyone have any comments about any of these elements of memory? So again, we talked about the stories, we talked about writing, we talked about a monument, we talked about actions or behaviors in memory of, and all of these are present. And I don't think it's one more than another, but they all lend something different to memory. I'm just seeing your chat, Elaine. We are people of memory. Endless memory, exactly. Remembering and concretizing our memories by observing rituals. Yeah, and it's easier in many ways to pass on a ritual and then to connect the story to the ritual. So yes, thank you for that comment. And she was the director, Anita. I didn't think that she was the day-to-day director. Okay, so tell me more. Here, you can take your hand down. Tell us more about Eliza, the funeral, the orphanage director. Sorry.
It's just what that book that I put in the chat, that if people want to know, it's just some background information about
Thank you.
The lyrics of the show. So if anybody wants to just read this, it says, the orphanage still exists in the form of the Graham Wyndham organization. Her true legacy is in the future of those children. She was the director of this orphanage for 27 years.
Thank you. Yeah. I actually just got the book. It's remarkable.
It's good.
I haven't made my way through it yet.
Yeah.
But I guess I didn't think that was her full-time job. I guess that was just my own. I didn't look into that. But it's remarkable.
I had another comment about what you were saying before, the storytelling and the narrative and the role of storytelling. First of all, I think that's one of the reasons that theater and our own tradition and our text, actually every culture has a history of storytelling, because I think that's the only way human beings find continuity. The challenge, I think, for us today is to be able to hold two narratives or three narratives in our head at the same time, to acknowledge that there are other narratives, that our narrative is not the only one. And the challenge, it's that cognitive dissonance thing that humans have, but our brain is able to do this, is to be able to recognize other narratives as important and real.
Well, and every narrative is an interpretation. So, I mean, this is one thing I appreciate that you mentioned, that narrative and tradition, and you're right, every culture, and we've seen now multiple narratives around around different histories. But I also wanted to use this chance to reflect on, the process that we've been in all year, This is why I was so taken with the idea of bringing theater to Torah text, because in Torah we have narrative, in theater we have an experiential way of experiencing the narrative. Oh, I'm looking at the comment about the gravestone.
And also the narrative.
Thank you, daughter of Philip Schuyler, widow of Alexander Hamilton. Thanks,
there's
Max.
There's an accepted understanding of the narrative that is passed down. And I think that's one of the, again, one of the challenges that our society here in America certainly is beginning to acknowledge other narratives that have to somehow fit into the one we were taught. And it's not easy. It causes a great deal of angst.
You know, I'd like to think that we as Jews who study text should know how to hold multiple narratives, because this is what we do. We take a text, Breshit Bara, and we say, Rashi says this, Ramban says that, the Ibn Ezra says that, and then you get to, you know, the modern commentaries. And we can say that a single sentence can teach multiple messages at the same time. A single narrative maybe speaks to different people at different times in history in different ways. Thank you. Other comments, thoughts, reflections?
Elaine, she just posted something. Are you talking to me personally?
No, that was before. She posted it before you started. The can you be specific?
Yeah.
Oh, you could.
Yeah.
I mean, go ahead, Elaine.
No, I just wanted to know which one she was specifically talking about, since there are many, many narratives in the world. And are you talking about a narrative that you think is in conflict with our narrative? I wasn't quite sure what you're saying.
Oh,
because
if you want, I mean, I'll answer that. I think, as they say, B'kitzur, just like really quickly, this country is going through a great deal.
You say this country, you mean the United States? I just want to clarify. You're sitting in the United States.
Right. I'm sitting in the United States. Right. So the narrative of the African American, the narrative of the Asian Pacific and Asians who have come here, that we were taught one thing, but their narrative is just as real and just as important. We also see this in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and I will just leave it at that.
Look, we're not going to get into politics in this room. However, I will add that in Canada as well, with the Indigenous peoples, there's a lot of struggle to tell and retell narratives from different perspectives. And it's very dangerous when people simplify narratives. I'll just add that dimension. It's what I think we're seeing now is also people simplifying things into victim and perpetrator. And it's never that simple, because that dehumanizes either the victim or the perpetrator, or makes everybody into a black and white schema, which isn't necessarily helpful. I want to actually, because we only have a few minutes left, I just, for those who have been with us, I just want to remind us of sort of the journey that we took, and quickly run down the list of the many musicals that we've visited during the year. We listened to Les Miserables. We listened to West Side Story, America. We visited Blankets and Bedding from the musical Come From Away. We did a little bit of Wicked and Into the Woods, Joseph and the Technicolor Dreamcoat, 110 in the Shade, Newsies, My Fair Lady, another visit to Les Mis and Wicked, the musical Annie, the musical Secret Garden, Fiddler on the Roof. And now we've been spending time with Hamilton for quite a few months. So it's been quite a journey. I can't promise that this is what we'll go to in the fall. I'm tempted to push myself to come up with something different. But I always take a break in the summer, so I'm using the break to sort of think about what comes next, to use a line from Hamilton, by the way. That was what the king said, what comes next? We don't know what comes next. But I thought maybe we could listen to this last song one more time, even though it is a tearjerker. It's going to take us on a roller coaster ride again. I thought we could listen to it one more time, and then, you know, I'll stay well past the hour for anyone who wants to stay and schmooze. I want this room to be free from the Israeli-Palestinian conflict right now. So if you'd like to chat about that, just another time and another space, because this is our happy space, our Wednesday space. And I mean, I'm happy for the comments that came. I just don't want to keep going in that direction. That's all I'm saying. So I appreciate that. And yes, Evelyn.
You had told us, I believe, that one could see Hamilton on a Disney channel.
Disney Plus. So it's a service that Disney has available for a fee. And if you pay the monthly fee, even if you just pay 1 month, I don't remember what it costs, but yes, that's the only way you can see Hamilton right now.
But you see the entire play?
The entire play. In
Wow.
fact, they took video of several performances and wove them together so that it is like the best of the best of the best. It's remarkable. Oh, $7 US, Anita says, okay.
Raphael?
It's about $7 US for a
Treat
month.
yourself.
And then you can cancel, you can watch it as many times as you want, and then you can cancel after a month.
Okay, so everybody
it's
go
fine,
off
but
and
it's-
sign up for Disney Plus, watch it every day for a month, and then cancel your subscription.
Raphael, do you use this in class with all students?
So unfortunately, what I discovered the first time I tried to play it off of Disney Plus onto my screen here is that Disney Plus is smarter than I am. And it doesn't let me screen share it. It doesn't let me show it to you because it's a subscription service. So that's why I go searching around on YouTube for the little clips that they've made publicly available for no fee. But if you sign up for Disney Plus, thank you. If you sign up for Disney Plus, you can watch the entire musical, and it's worth it. If you ask me, it's
And
well
by the way,
worth it.
as filmed musicals go, this one is incredibly well done. The cameras are at different angles. In fact, I have seen it live, and you can see it almost better because of the way the cameras are placed in this production. So,
Rachel, do you teach older kids, or is that part of your work?
I teach anyone, everyone.
Do you teach grade 10 and 11 in Hebrew
Yes,
Academy?
we have our, I don't teach in any of the schools, but we have our NCSY teen programming
because
that we do at the Shar. And yeah, this would be a great thing to bring to them. You're right.
This concept of pulling in young people by being so hip and cool as modern.
They still think I'm old. Don't worry, it's okay. But I am going to be spending some time in a summer camp this summer. I'm hoping to bring this there.
It was an extraordinary experience.
Thank you. Is it all right if we play it one more time? I like ending on the music. Yes, I'm getting a thumbs up. Okay. And then I promise I won't close the Zoom. I want to end on the music one more time. And feel free, if you feel comfortable in the chat, you can keep sharing your thoughts or gratitude in the chat. I'm going to share just the sound so we don't get those. Evelyn, the YouTube ads pop in because it's like public video, but on my audio, I have the soundtrack through a subscription to Apple Music, whatever. So my audio is pure. It's the soundtrack of the cast. All right, so this is our Who Lives, Who Dies, Who Tells Your Story. Once again, one last time to take another line. And we're just going to listen to this, and then we'll stay and schmooze for anyone who wants to.
Let me tell you what I wish I'd known when I was young and dreamed of glory. You have no control. Who lives, who dies, who tells your story?
President Jefferson. I'll give him this. His financial system is a work of genius. I couldn't undo it if I tried. And I tried.
Who dies, who tells your story?
President Madison. He took our country from bankruptcy to prosperity. I hate to admit it, but he doesn't get enough credit for all the credit he gave us.
Who lives, who dies, who tells your story?
Every other founding father story gets told. Every other founding father gets to grow old.
And when you're gone, who remembers your name? Who keeps your flame? Who tells your story? Who tells your story? Who tells your story?
Eliza, I put myself back in the narrative. I stop wasting time on tears. I live another 50 years. It's not enough. I interview every soldier who fought by your side.
She tells our story.
I try to make sense of your thousands of pages of writings. You really do write like you're running out of time. I rely on Angelica. While she's alive, we tell your story. She is buried in Trinity Church near you. When I needed her most, she was right on time. And I'm still not through. I ask myself, what would you do if you had more time? The Lord in his kindness, he gives me what you always wanted. He gives me more time. I raise funds in D.C. for the Washington Monument.
She tells my story.
I speak out against slavery. You could have done so much more if you only had time. And when my time is up, have I done enough? Will they tell your story? Oh, can I show you what I'm proudest of?
The orphanage.
I established the first private orphanage in New York City.
The orphanage.
I helped raise hundreds of children. I get to see them growing up. In their eyes I see you, Alexander. I see you every time. And when my time is up, have I done enough? Will they tell your story? Oh, I can't wait to see you again. It's only a matter of time.
Will they tell your story? Who lives, who dies, who tells your story? Will they tell your story? Who lives, who dies, who tells your story?
Thank you, Rabbi Rachel. Rabba.
Thank you. Thank you. Max asked a great question that we can all leave us with. What would you do if you had more time? So thank
It's
you.
Eliza's question.
Yes, yes. You're saying it leaves us in the audience thinking. Yeah, thank you, Max.
I think
Toda Rabba.
time is our most valuable commodity.
That's right.
That's why I have a car.
That's why we have to make every moment.
The commodity
Well, we have
doesn't
to make
rhyme with
every
anything.
moment count.
And